When I told my mom I was moving out to prove I could make it on my own, she laughed right in my face. "Ethan, you'll be crawling back home in less than a month," she said, and my dad of course nodded like she was reading from the Bible. I don't know what annoyed me more, their smugness or the fact that they were already picturing me broke, jobless, and begging for leftovers. So, naturally, I had to prove them wrong. I sent my resume to every big-name company in New York City, and by some stroke of luck or maybe just my ability to wing an interview like a champ, I got a callback the very next day. The company? Lane Group. Yeah, that Lane Group. The kind of company that screams, "You'll never get past the front desk unless your last name is on the building." And somehow, they offered me a job. Okay, not a glamorous position, I was just an intern executive assistant, but still, that was enough for me to parade around my Manhattan loft and tell my mom, "See? I told you so." And yes, I was riding that high for weeks. But what no one told me about this job was that my new boss, Victoria Lane, wasn't just any CEO. She wasn't some beer-bellied guy in his 40s barking orders over his morning bagel, and she definitely wasn't one of those fake smiling, syrupy corporate boss ladies who try too hard. No. She was unreal. Gorgeous in a way that made people stop mid-sentence. The kind of woman who could be on the cover of Forbes and Vogue in the same month. Around the city, she was known as the golden heiress of the Lane family, and if you asked me, that was still underselling it. I'd like to say working for her was a dream, but no. It was a nightmare. Victoria had a special talent for keeping me busy with the most random requests. "Ethan, bring me a glass of water." I'd deliver it, only to hear 5 minutes later, "Ethan, I need a coffee." Then 10 minutes after that, "Ethan, an iced water, please." And God forbid I actually get to clock out, she'd call me on my way home, "Ethan, bring that file to my apartment." I'd show up, and she'd answer the door fresh out of the shower, hair wet, water dripping down her neck. Try focusing on a stack of documents in that situation. Spoiler, you can't. I swear she was one request away from asking me to move in and be her full-time butler. After a month of this, I looked at my bank account, saw my pathetic intern paycheck, and decided it was time to cry to my mom for a little emergency funding. I typed, "Your baby is about to go get himself a sugar baby, send money," hit send, and went to shower. I didn't realize until I came out, towel over my head, that my phone had been blowing up with messages. My stomach dropped when I saw who I'd sent it to. Not my mom. Not even close. I'd sent it to Victoria Lane. And to make it worse, I'd accidentally typed "wife" instead of "mom." Yeah. I basically texted my gorgeous, intimidating boss that I was about to get myself a sugar baby, called her "wife," and hit send. I froze. My brain instantly started drafting my resignation letter. I figured I'd deal with the fallout in the morning. So I threw my phone on airplane mode, collapsed on the bed, and prayed she'd forget about it. Wishful thinking. At 11 p.m., my phone lit up. "Ethan, did you take something?" Wife isn't a word you toss around lightly. And what's this about a sugar baby? If you even think about it, I have no problem calling in certain people to handle you. At midnight, another text, "Seems like you're not busy enough if you have time for this. Don't pretend you're asleep." Who was that message for? "Your HR file says you're single. Lost a bet? Doing a dare? Speak up." Then at 1 a.m., "You wouldn't happen to be into me, would you? Playing hard to get? That doesn't work on me, Ethan." By 3 a.m., she was still going. "You really went for it, huh? Not even going to reply? Do you plan to keep this up until I give up? Guess what won't happen? If you don't answer, I'll just retract every message and make you wonder forever." And finally, at 6 a.m., "Babe, why don't you just take a look at me? I'm not prettier than them." I stared at that last one, completely blank. Babe? Take a look at her. Was this for real? I barely had time to think before another bubble popped up, still not at work. Don't tell me you're hiding from me. She was typing so fast, I could see the waiting for me to respond. I finally sent a pathetic MS. Lane, I sent that to the wrong person, and I made a typo. Sorry. With a bow emoji, because I'm apparently a coward. She replied after a long pause, oh, I was drunk. My friend sent those. Sure. The woman who could drink a table of Wall Street bros under the table without blinking. Drunk? Yeah, right. Before I could overthink it, she deleted the message. That's when I knew this was going to spiral. And I was right. By the time I walked into the office later, I realized she had posted in the company's private group chat in the middle of the night, why would a boyfriend ignore my messages? That set off a feeding frenzy among employees, all giving her relationship advice. Someone even said, use your looks and body to win him over. No man can resist that. Meanwhile, she stayed quiet, just watching. And that was the beginning of how my life turned into the most chaotic, gossip-fueled mess Lane Group had ever seen. By the time I settled at my desk that morning, I'd already seen the carnage blowing up in the company's private chats. Victoria's late night, why would a boyfriend ignore my messages, post had turned the whole Lane Group into amateur relationship therapists. The vice president kicked it off by telling her to soften her tone and apologize, others jumped in with, don't let him cool off too long, go see him, and my personal favorite, just seduce him, nothing physical attraction can't fix. I almost spit out my coffee. This was the same woman who scared billionaires into folding in board meetings, now getting love advice from her own employees. And then it got worse. A couple of the Boulder staff created a new private chat, Gossip Room 2, without Victoria in it. The name alone told you where this was going. They were speculating about who her mystery boyfriend could be. Some swore it was someone in the company because she'd been spending way more time on site lately, dressing sharper, even wearing cufflinks and tie clips on normal weekdays. That's peacock behavior, one person wrote. Then someone joked, what if it's that new intern in the executive office? What's his name, Ethan Grant? The one with the baby face? Another replied, no way, he's too fresh out of school. She'd crush him. I wanted to stand up and shout, I graduated 3 years ago, you clowns, but I just sat there sipping my coffee, pretending I couldn't see the chat lighting up my phone. Then Ryan Cooper strutted in. Ryan was the head of a foreign projects team, a title he got not by merit but because his uncle was the chairman of Cooper Enterprises, a major Lane Group partner. Translation, spoiled trust fund peacock. He'd been circling Victoria since day one, using every excuse to pop into her office. That morning, without Victoria in the room, he typed into Gossip Room 2, sorry I went to bed early last night and missed the messages. Which, of course, read like an indirect confession that he was the boyfriend in Victoria's post. I nearly choked on my bagel. This guy. This overgelled, bleach blonde, self-proclaimed heartthrob. No. Even if it wasn't me, it sure as hell wasn't him. The best part? Nobody replied to his little humble brag. Dead silence. Minutes later, I got pulled into yet another chat, this one called Gossip Room 3. Smaller group, tighter circle, still no Victoria or Ryan. Theories were flying. What if he's actually her fiancé from some arranged marriage deal? Maybe it's some mystery rich guy from outside the company. Or maybe it is Ethan. And just like that, my name was back in the blender. I could practically feel my ears turning red as I pretended to work on a spreadsheet. I was still reading the madness when my phone pinged with a green bubble. Victoria. Where are you? Just those 3 words. My hands froze over the keyboard. If I opened the chat, she'd see the little typing dots, and I wasn't ready for that kind of trap. A minute later, she deleted the message and sent, which office are you in? Wait for me. Oh, perfect. More cryptic queen behavior. I texted back, on my way to the office, MS. Lane. Need something? She didn't answer. When I pulled into the Lane Group parking garage, I killed time scrolling through Instagram before going upstairs. Bad move. The first post at the top of my feed nearly made me drop my phone. Victoria had posted, "My future boyfriend is so cute when he calls me. Who the hell was she talking about?" The timestamp was right when I'd been ignoring her texts earlier. My brain said, she can't possibly mean me, but my gut wasn't so sure. I barely had time to process before I was summoned. "Ethan, bring me a glass of water." Fine. I grabbed the glass, walked into her office, and there she was, gold-rimmed glasses, tailored suit, looking like a stock photo for expensive and untouchable. She took the water, sipped, and winced. Too hot. I nodded, left, came back with warm water. She drank again, tilted her head. Cold water. At this point I was convinced she was messing with me, but I went and got it. When I set it down, she eyed me and said, "Secret side hustle? Doing psychic readings to fund your little sugar baby plan?" My hand almost slipped. MS. Lane, last night's message was meant for my mom. I sent it to the wrong person. Total typo. She gave me a long then said, "Well, I wasn't drunk, and I wasn't hacked. Every message I sent you, I meant." My brain short-circuited. "Wait, you." She didn't answer, just walked over, reached to fix my hair. Instinct kicked in. I swatted her hand away like it was on fire and bolted for the door. Once outside, I forced my face into a neutral mask and sat back at my desk like nothing had happened. Nobody needed to know my boss had just admitted she wasn't joking. Then Ryan came peacocking in with a coffee cup identical to the one Victoria was holding. "I'll bring this to her," he said loud enough for half the floor to hear. I happily waved him on. 2 minutes later, he came back out looking like someone had slapped him with the coffee cup. Victoria's voice cut through the air, "Ethan, did you leave your ears at home today?" I dragged myself in, Ryan right on my heels. He immediately piped up, "MS. Lane." I didn't stop him from delivering it, said I could take it. "Did not," I said flatly, and then hit play on my phone, where I'd recorded him saying exactly that. Dead silence. Victoria looked from me to him, then back, her eyes cold enough to frost glass. "Ryan, when did I give you the authority to overstep your role? You weren't even listed on the last project proposal." He stammered something about a misunderstanding. Translation: he'd been caught climbing over people to get his position. Victoria stripped him of his team leader title on the spot. Gossip Room 3 exploded with cheering emojis. I didn't celebrate too loud. She had me running back to her office with yet another drink. Warm but not hot water this time. When I set it down, I accidentally tipped it enough to spill onto her skirt. Perfect. She'd get annoyed, declare me incompetent, and stop calling me in every 5 minutes. Except the water hit a little too high, and now my hands were full of paper towels, trying to clean it off without actually touching her. "Sorry, I didn't mean," she caught my wrist mid-motion. "And where exactly were you planning to wipe?" Her face was flushed, her voice low, and my brain went straight to places HR wouldn't approve of. I yanked my hand back and practically ran out. 20 minutes later, I tried to distract myself by checking my feed again. Big mistake. New post from Victoria: "My future boyfriend looks adorable when he blushes. I just want to kiss him." My phone buzzed non-stop as Gossip Room 3 lit up. "Who's making the boss blush in the office? I want that job." At this point, I was convinced she'd gone insane, or maybe she was just playing a game I didn't know the rules to. Either way, this was no longer about water, coffee, or typoed texts. This was a full-on storm, and I was right in the eye of it. The bathroom was the only safe zone left in Lane group, so I hid there like a coward, scrolling through group chat 3 while pretending to contemplate life over a paper towel dispenser. The gossip was getting feral, half the office turning into FBI interns connecting dots between Victoria's midnight post and every single male who'd been within a 5-foot radius of her this week. And every other message was my name with a question mark, like I'd personally sent a press release about being her future boyfriend, which I obviously hadn't, because I was busy trying not to combust every time she looked at me over those gold-rimmed glasses, and right when I thought I could breathe, the green bubble popped up on my screen like a jump scare. I'm at the door, come out. I almost launched my phone into the toilet, and before I could invent a reason to vanish into the vents, her heels clicked outside, that cool contralto slipping under the door. Ethan, and I swear the bathroom stall shrank 2 sizes, so I flushed for cover, washed my hands like it was a religious ritual, and stepped out to find Victoria leaning on the frame with a paper cup in one hand and that unreadable "Wall Street will die by my pen" look on her face. "You've been gone for 20 minutes, did the sink seduce you?" she asked, and I managed a dry, "hydration is important" mess. Lane, and then she surprised me by dropping the banter, "Come up to the roof," so I followed her to the helipad deck that crowned Lane Tower, where the wind ate the city noise and she sat on a stone bench with a second cup of coffee waiting, slid it across like an offering, and said without preface, "I'm in a mood," which coming from her meant nuclear markets and dead-on arrival mergers. But then she looked at me, not the skyline. "There's a charity gala tonight, the New York Charity Gala, come with me," and my mouth was already forming a polite no when she added, 10,000 for the night, and listen, I have pride, but my bank account has rent, so what came out was, "Happy to support philanthropy," and she huffed a laugh like I'd amused her in spite of herself, sipped her coffee, and pretended not to notice I was staring at the curve of her mouth like an idiot. The wind picked up and for a second it felt almost normal. 2 colleagues stress bonding over caffeine and public relations, until my phone vibrated again and group chat 3 exploded with screenshots of Victoria's new post, "My future boyfriend even drinks coffee, cute," which turned my brain into static because I was literally drinking coffee at that exact moment, and if she wasn't talking about me then the universe was trolling me personally, and I slid the cup further from the edge like distance would dilute the evidence. Only for Ryan Cooper to strut through the executive floor an hour later with the exact same cup and a bakery bag like he'd invented croissants, brought Ms. Lane her usual, he announced at full volume to no one in particular, and 3 minutes later he got ejected from her office like a malfunctioning printer while Victoria's voice sliced the air. "Ethan, are your ears decorative today?" So I went in, accepted the iceburn look she gave Ryan, and watched her dismantle his authority with one question about why his name wasn't on the last proposal, which was corporate for "You don't belong here," and when he sputtered that he was misinformed, she cut his team lead title in half with a sentence, and somewhere in the building the interns began a silent conga line because even without the chats I could feel the overtime gods being appeased. I didn't celebrate because the universe has timing and mine is tragic, so when I brought her yet another water warm, not hot, not cold, I tipped it just a hair to stage a harmless mess and maybe earn fewer errands. And of course fate made it arc high enough to wet the hemline way too intimately, and suddenly my hands were full of napkins and panic as I hovered, "Sorry, let me," and she caught my wrist, eyes cooler than the glass, "And where were you planning to wipe, Ethan?" which short-circuited my soul, so I fled like a cartoon character, sat at my desk, and pretended to merge spreadsheets while my heart thrashed like it was late to a fire. By lunch I'd relocated to the roof again because pretending the sky could solve my life is cheaper than therapy, and she found me there like she owned not just the building but gravity, set a fresh coffee beside me, and said, "I wasn't drunk last night," like we'd never left that thread hanging. I meant what I sent, and I looked at the city because eye contact felt like stepping off the ledge. Managed, so did I, about the typo, which earned me the ghost of a smile and the barest touch on my sleeve that burned through cloth like voltage. Then she exhaled and shifted gears. "The gala dress code is black tie. Be ready at 7, and I thought about my single decent suit and said, "I'll look like a rental car next to you," and she said, "You'll look like mine," then stood and left me with nothing but wind, caffeine, and a disaster of a heartbeat. Fast forward to evening and I'm buttoning my jacket in the mirror, wondering if my tie is trying to assassinate me, when the town car pings my phone. And 10 minutes later I'm stepping out with Victoria on my arm into a flash storm of cameras and champagne, and if you've never walked a carpet Beside a woman who turns men into architecture, it's like being upgraded to first-class humanity against your will, every eye measuring her and then clocking me like a glitch in the simulation, and the room was full of New York's favorite hobbies: old money, new money, legacy egos, and every other heir in a tux tried to toast her, ms. Lane, one drink, ms. Lane, our foundation, ms. Lane, a photo, and she deflected with immaculate politeness, then casually used me as a human shield. Ask him if he likes me, and I wanted to crawl into the centerpiece, but playing along was safer than thinking, so I said things like, "She's out of your league and mine," which made a tech prince blink like I'd slapped him with a balance sheet. 30 minutes in, a white suit cut through the room like a disco ball on legs, and there he was, Ryan. Hair like a bleach accident, a grin he probably practiced, and a confidence powered exclusively by family trees, ms. Lane, he purred, "Didn't expect to see you here," and she stared like she was trying to place a distant acquaintance from a flight delay. "Are you a guest?" And he went, "Of course, I'm your date," and I nearly choked on air while nearby socialites prepared their popcorn, and Victoria took a clean, surgical beat before replying, "Then your expenses won't be reimbursed, you chose to attend," which might be the coldest way to say you're not with me in recorded history, and Ryan turned the color of undercooked shrimp, sputtered about being an employee and why there was unequal treatment, and something in me snapped, the part that had been dying a little all day, so I said, "Calm as a finance report, because you spend more time trying to flirt with the boss than doing your job, and I spend my time trying to do my job," and the ripple of O from the surrounding donors could have powered Midtown. Ryan clenched his jaw, stepped toward me with that twitchy fight or flop energy, and before security needed to earn their check I felt Victoria's hand slide across my shoulders, tugging me into her side like a legal claim. "He's allowed to be shameless," she said, tone honeyed and homicidal, "I prefer it," then looked at Ryan as if he were an inconvenient spreadsheet error, which is worse than contempt because it's dismissal. And the crowd did what crowds do, sided with the gravity in the room, and Ryan retreated with a face you only see on people who realize the party isn't about them. We made the rounds after that, silent language forming between us in the space between hands and glasses and small talk smiles, and for the first time since the airplane mode debacle I wasn't only terrified, I was aware of something else, something like inevitability, and when it was over the driver pulled up to my building like he'd always known where I lived. She squeezed my shoulder through the fabric and said, "Text me when you're upstairs," and I joked, "What if I ignore my girlfriend's messages?" And she said, "Then I'll call building security," which is, frankly, hotter than it should be, and I rode the elevator with my pulse in my teeth, keyed into my place, stared at the city from my window until the glass fogged with my breath, and finally checked my phone like a man checking for a heartbeat. She'd posted again, of course. My future boyfriend curses like a sailor when he's flustered, adorable, with a shadowy photo of two silhouettes on a sidewalk that could have been anyone but felt exactly like us, and the likes were already stacking up like a bonfire, and group chat 3 was combusting, people declaring they wanted to be the office chair in her suite or the pen in her hand as if that would get them baptized in her attention, and I laughed into the quiet because it was either that or overthink myself into a coma. Sleep did that thing where it pretends to exist and then abandons you. So by dawn my brain had already drafted 6 ways to avoid both HR and destiny, and the most elegant solution was ancient and cowardly. I texted my team lead that I was taking a sick day, shut off my alarms, and tried to vanish into sheets and denial, but the universe and Victoria are cousins, so my phone buzzed with a private message, 2 hours later, no words, just a pin drop and a heart, and I didn't have to open the door to know the knock I'd hear next would be her. Which is to say the story was done pretending to be subtle, and part 4 was about to walk into my living room with a thermos and a plan. I woke up to the knock exactly when I knew it would come, and sure enough, when I cracked open the door there was Victoria Lane standing in my hallway like she owned the building, holding a full thermos in one hand and a white paper bag in the other, her hair pulled back in that effortless, I could be running a billion-dollar deal or a fashion shoot way, and before I could say a single word she stepped inside without asking, "Where does it hurt?" She asked like she was a doctor on call, and I was still in my sweats trying to remember if I'd brushed my teeth. "It's just a cold," I lied, which would have been more convincing if the trash can in the corner didn't still have the empty ice cream wrapper from last night, the one I'd eaten while recovering, and she noticed it instantly, gave me that half smirk that meant she'd already written me off as a bad patient. "You're sick and you ate ice cream," she said like a prosecutor presenting evidence, and before I could defend myself she was in my kitchen, pouring out the thermos into a mug. "Red sugar water," she said matter-of-factly, "warms you up, helps your stomach," and my brain was too busy screaming, "Why are you in my apartment making me drinks like we're already married?" to form a counterargument, so I took it, sipped, and tried not to make a face because it was sweeter than my paycheck. And while I was gulping it down she wandered into my living room and started looking around like she was doing an interior design audit. Her eyes landing on the wall where my sneaker collection lined up like a shrine. "Real or fake?" she asked, and I panicked because I knew what she was thinking, so I blurted, "They're replicas, my roommates are influencers, they love this stuff," which was technically a lie because I lived alone, but I wasn't about to admit that to the CEO of my company, and she didn't call me on it. Just kept walking until she spotted the Ferrari key on the coffee table, and I grabbed it so fast I almost dropped the mug, shoved it next to a Lego model and muttered, "Also fake," and she just smiled like she could see straight through me but decided not to say it out loud, which somehow was worse, and by the time she finished rinsing the empty mug in my sink I was wondering if this was her subtle way of saying "You're mine now," because that's exactly how it felt. And it only got more confusing when I woke up from an unplanned nap later and realized I was in bed under my blanket but with no memory of walking there, meaning she'd carried me, which was both embarrassing and yeah, I'll stop there. The pain hit later, me stomach acting up like it always does when I eat junk on an empty stomach, and I stumbled out toward the kitchen only to find her still at my dining table, laptop open, typing like she'd relocated the Lane Group HQ to my apartment, and the second she saw me doubled over she was on her feet, helping me back to bed with surprising gentleness. "This is what you get for ignoring me when I tell you not to eat cold stuff," she scolded, and I would have rolled my eyes if the pain wasn't making me tear up, so I let her fuss over me, even when she pulled out her phone and called in a friend who's a doctor, and 10 minutes later a woman in business casual and a stethoscope walked in, gave me one look, and said, "It's just a stomach cramp," and then proceeded to roast Victoria for panicking over nothing, which apparently is something she'd been waiting to do for years because she left laughing like she'd just won a bet, and Victoria sat back down with a stubborn set to her jaw. "I don't trust her," she muttered, and when I asked, "Isn't she a Harvard-educated MD?" she just said, "Bad taste in men," like that was relevant, and I didn't have the energy to fight it, so I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep, thinking she'd leave, but when I cracked one eye open an hour later she was still there, sitting in a chair beside my bed, watching me like I might vanish if she blinked. When I finally felt well enough to talk I decided to test something, so I reached out a hand and said, "You could just make it official and date me," and I swear she lit up like someone had just handed her a merger she'd been chasing for years. "You're saying yes?" she asked like she needed it confirmed in writing, and I nodded, "If you ask, maybe," which made her lean down and kiss my forehead, soft and quick. "Then I'm asking." And before I could react she was already back in her chair, smug in a way that made me want to roll over and let her win just to see how far she'd go, and apparently the answer was very far because from that day on she started picking me up for work, dropping me off, sending me lunch, and my apartment slowly turned into a warehouse for expensive gifts that I had no space for, from designer watches to limited edition sneakers, until my shelves looked like a celebrity's walk-in closet. A week later my mom finally remembered I existed, called me out of the blue and said, "Get home now, someone's here to talk marriage," and I nearly choked. "What marriage? I'm 28, not 40, but she hung up before I could finish, so I threw on whatever I could find and drove out to my parents' place, rehearsing my "no way" speech, but the second I walked into the living room I froze because there, sitting across from my mother and looking perfectly at home, was Victoria, sipping tea. Like she'd been part of the family for years, and I realized with horror that my current outfit, a thrift store suit jacket over a t-shirt and jeans, was doing me zero favors, and it got worse when my dad, clearly trying to cover for me, said to her, "Sorry, he's just the new housekeeper, calls everyone mom and dad, bad habit," and physically pushed me toward the back to change into work clothes, which was the most awkward retreat I've ever made. By the time I came back, they were chatting like old friends, my mom laughing like Victoria had just given her stock tips, and the only thing stopping them from cracking open a bottle of wine was my dad's reminder that it was still daylight. "I'm just happy someone wants to deal with him," my mom said with a look that should be classified as a weapon, and I sat down across from Victoria, trying not to look like I'd just been blindsided. How did you even know my last name? I asked quietly, and she just smiled and said, because I wanted to, like that explained everything, then added, and because I couldn't wait, which was a lot, so I told her she was still in her probationary period and she had to earn it, which made her grin like I'd challenged her to a game she was already winning. That night she posted the announcement, no names, just a photo of our shadows walking side by side with the caption, "Finally found him," and if the company gossip chats had been bad before, they were now a nuclear meltdown, with half the office pretending to faint and the other half betting on when the wedding would be, and somewhere in that chaos Ryan Cooper lost what was left of his dignity, stormed into the executive floor yelling about how unfair it was that he'd been fired, only for my team lead to tell him point blank, "You do nothing but gossip and chase women, the badge scanner is more productive than you," and when he tried to claim he had a special relationship with Victoria, I couldn't help myself. I laughed and said, "Yeah, the relationship of two strangers in the same zip code," which made his face turn redder than his tie. He lunged, and I remembered I actually had a black belt in Taekwondo, so I caught his arm, flipped him over my shoulder, and pinned him before he could blink. That's when the elevator dinged and Victoria walked in, taking in the scene with one raised brow. "Did he hurt you?" she asked. "Not him," meaned when I said no. She looked at Ryan like he was a stain on her designer carpet. "Why are you still here? I told HR to terminate you." And just like that, security was escorting him out while the entire floor watched. I thought that would be the end of it, but as I tried to step back to my desk she caught my hand, pulled me closer, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "This is my fiancé, Ethan Grant," which was apparently news to me too, because now there was no pretending this was just office gossip. Anna Marie, it was official, and there was no way back. Moving into her place happened faster than I expected. One weekend I was packing a few things, and the next I was living in her Manhattan penthouse, and I'll admit I thought it was going to be all heat and luxury, but Victoria Lane is a master of restraint. She could kiss me until my knees gave out and still pull away like nothing happened, leaving me frustrated enough to contemplate starting a petition against self-control, and after a month of that I snapped, pinned her against the couch one night and said, "Not just looking, I'm touching," and she laughed, "Pervert," but let me unbutton her shirt one piece at a time until my hands were shaking, and just when I thought I'd finally won she pushed me back, turned off the light and said, "Let me handle it," and that's when I learned exactly what full automation meant in her world. When I woke up the next morning sore in places I didn't know could be sore, she was still there, holding me like I was something she'd waited too long to get, and when I tried to slip out she caught me. "Don't you want to know when I first liked you?" And I said sure, expecting some romantic story, but she just smiled and said, "Since you started at Lane Group," and when I joked about love at first sight she rolled her eyes. "That's not real, it was want at first sight," which somehow made my chest feel tighter than anything else she'd said, and when I finally remembered that summer years ago when I used to follow the neighbor girl who played piano, she just looked at me and said, "I didn't want to be your sister, Ethan, I wanted to be the person you woke up next to," and before I could react she had me under the covers again, no more room for arguments. By the time we'd been living together for a few weeks, I thought I had Victoria Lane figured out, emphasis on thought, because on the surface she was still the same high-powered CEO who could turn a boardroom into a battlefield, but behind closed doors she had a knack for keeping me permanently off balance, alternating between moments that felt like domestic bliss and power plays that reminded me exactly who I was dealing with. Mornings were her making coffee in an oversized shirt while I tried not to stare, nights were her pressing a kiss to my temple before retreating to her side of the bed like she hadn't just set my pulse on fire, and in between there were endless little tests, like dropping a casual, "What would you do if I sold Lane Group?" while we were eating breakfast just to watch my expression. So I learned fast that in this house, victory was temporary and every concession on her part was probably part of a larger strategy, and maybe I should have been suspicious when she started driving me to work every day, waiting for me downstairs with my favorite latte, but I wasn't, because honestly, it felt good to be wanted that much, even if it came with the quiet pressure of knowing she could outlast me in any standoff. The rest of the office had moved past whispers into full-on open speculation, Group Chat 3 basically treating my relationship like a Netflix series, tracking every new designer item that appeared on my desk like they were piecing together clues, but I ignored It must lie because if I let myself think too much about how fast all this had escalated, I might panic, and the truth was, I didn't want to panic, I wanted to see where it went, even if it meant navigating the minefield that was Victoria's mix of tenderness and control. It was about a month in when she brought up the charity auction she was headlining, sliding the glossy invitation across the kitchen counter like it was a normal piece of mail. "You're coming with me," she said, not asked, and before I could remind her that public appearances together were basically adding gasoline to the gossip bonfire, she leaned on the counter and added, "Unless you'd rather I show up alone and let everyone think I'm still available," which was the kind of bait no sane man could take, so I sighed and agreed, and that's how I ended up in another black tie situation, walking into the Midtown Grand Ballroom with her on my arm while half the city's elite tried to figure out what bet I must have won to get there. She worked the room with surgical precision, introducing me to venture capitalists and senators like she was adding me to her resume, and every time someone got a little too friendly she'd tighten her grip on my arm, a subtle little claim of ownership I pretended not to notice but absolutely did. The highlight of the night, if you could call it that, was running into Ryan Cooper again, because apparently getting publicly humiliated and fired wasn't enough to keep him away from these circles, and he had the nerve to walk up with that same practiced smile, looking me up and down like he was trying to find the crack in my armor. "Didn't realize they let interns into these things," he said, and I was halfway through deciding whether to bother replying, when Victoria turned her full attention on him. "Didn't realize they let irrelevant people in either," she said sweetly, and I swear you could hear the ego deflating, and if I didn't know better I'd say she enjoyed that more than winning a deal. The ride home was quiet, but not the bad kind, more like the air right before a summer storm, and when we got upstairs she dropped her clutch on the entryway table, turned to me, and said, "You know, you've been very well behaved tonight," like she was giving me a quarterly review, and I wasn't sure whether to thank her or argue, so I did neither, just stepped closer until there was nowhere for her to back up, and told her I was done with probation, that I wanted more than these little teases she kept tossing my way, and she arched a brow like she was about to deliver a lecture, but instead she reached up, tugged at my tie, and said, "Prove you can handle it," and the rest of the night was a blur of heat and shadow, her letting me think I was in control until I wasn't, her pacing everything like she had a stopwatch in her head, and me realizing that whatever game she was playing, she'd been playing it a lot longer than I'd known. The next morning I woke up sore in places I didn't know I could be sore, sunlight spilling across her penthouse bedroom, and for a moment I considered just staying there, letting her have every win if it meant mornings like this, but she was already awake, propped up on one elbow watching me with that same expression she wore when she was about to buy out a competitor. "Don't you want to know when I decided to keep you?" she asked, and I told her I thought it was the day I started at Lane Group. But she shook her head. "No, it was when you swatted my hand away the first time I tried to fix your hair," and when I laughed and said that wasn't exactly a love story, she leaned down, kissed me, and said, "I like that you don't roll over easy, Ethan, but I like breaking you in even more," and I didn't even try to come up with a comeback because she was already pulling me back under the covers. Later that week, she insisted on driving me out to see my parents, and I knew she had an angle before we even got there. Victoria doesn't do casual visits, but I didn't expect her to charm my mom into planning a holiday dinner before we'd even finished coffee, or to stand in my childhood living room like she'd been there 100 times, fielding my dad's questions about business with the same ease she negotiated contracts. By the time we left, my parents were waving from the porch like we'd just announced an engagement, and in the car she casually mentioned that she'd already blocked off a week in December for family time, and when I asked whose family, she just smiled without looking at me, which was somehow more terrifying than if she'd answered. At work, things shifted fast. People stopped pretending to whisper and just started treating us like we were already married, and even the executive floor stopped giving me side eyes when I came in carrying her coffee order instead of the other way around. Group Chat 3 evolved into a fan club I never asked for, complete with running tallies of every time we were seen together, and I learned to live with the fact that in their minds I was no longer Ethan Grant, intern assistant. I was Mr. Lane in everything but paperwork. Part of me wanted to push back, to remind everyone I hadn't exactly signed up for all this, but another part, the part that woke up next to her every morning, knew I wasn't going anywhere, and maybe that was her plan all along, to make staying feel like the only option I wanted. Of course, with Victoria, settling in doesn't mean the pace slows down, it means the game changes, and I knew part 6 was coming the second she started talking about merging more than just our schedules, her tone too casual for how high the stakes felt, and I realized this was never just about office gossip or even the penthouse site was about her making sure there was no version of my life that didn't have her in it. I should have known that with Victoria Lane, there was never going to be such a thing as coasting in this relationship because as soon as I got comfortable in the penthouse, thinking we'd finally hit that sweet spot between domestic and chaotic, she cranked it up a notch, and I realized she wasn't just merging her schedule with mine, she was merging her life into mine until there was no seam to pull apart. Morning started with her casually sliding documents across the breakfast bar for me to look over, that just happened to have my name penciled in next to hers on Lane Group's future projects. Afternoons were punctuated by her sending me little green bubble texts like dinner at 7, or the navy suit, which somehow carried more authority than my entire job description, and nights nights were a mix of her being the same Victoria who'd leave me wrecked and grinning in her bed and the one who'd curl up against me like she was the one afraid I'd disappear. It should have been perfect, except for the part where every time I thought I was taking the lead, she'd prove she'd been 2 moves ahead the whole time. The company gossip machine, aka Group Chat 3, had evolved into a full-blown soap opera recap channel, complete with fan theories and memes about me being the first gentleman of Lane Group, and I'd learned to live with Ethel. Sometimes I even laughed at their commentary until one morning Victoria decided to drop a bomb in the main employee chat, the one with everyone in it, typing out, "If your boyfriend calls in sick, do you bring him lunch or move into his place to make sure he's hydrated?" Asking for a friend, and then leaving her phone screen angled just enough for me to see the typing indicator pop back up like she was baiting me into reacting, and I did the only thing I could do, ignored it, which of course made it worse, because 5 minutes later she was in my office doorway holding a thermos and a smile that was about 80% sweet and 20% dangerous. "Thought I'd bring you lunch," she said, setting it down like a warning shot, and my team just collectively decided to take an early break, leaving us alone in the room with nothing but the hum of the air conditioning. "Do you ever worry people will talk?" I asked, knowing full well they already did, and she tilted her head like she was pretending to consider it. "People will always talk, Ethan, the difference is whether you give them something worth talking about," and then she leaned down, kissed my jaw right there in my office, and left before I could even process it, which, naturally, resulted in 3 separate screenshots hitting Group Chat 3 within the hour. By the time I got home that night, she'd already booked us dinner at a new restaurant downtown, and halfway through the meal she pulled out her phone, snapped a picture of me mid-bite, and posted it to her feed with the caption, "My fiancé eats like he's plotting merger's deadly focus," and I didn't know whether to laugh or ask for witness protection. It was around then that my mom called again, not to grill me about marriage this time but to announce that she and my dad had invited Victoria over for dinner without telling me, which I discovered only when Victoria walked into the penthouse that evening wearing a dress I'd never seen before and said, "Your mom says she's making pot roast, I'm driving," like it was the most normal thing in the world. The dinner was exactly what you'd expect me, mom doting on her like she'd raised her, my dad asking business questions like he was interviewing her for a position in the family, and me sitting there wondering when exactly I'd lost control of my own life, though the answer was probably sometime between the first cup of water she ordered me to bring her and the night she showed up at my apartment with red sugar water. The real kicker came a week later, when Ryan Cooper, apparently incapable of learning from humiliation, showed up at Lane Group again, trying to talk his way back into the company. I was in the executive lounge when he came storming in, demanding to see Victoria, and before I could even say anything he started in on me, accusing me of using her and being in it for the perks. Which made me laugh because if anyone was in it for perks, it had been him, but before I could fire back, the elevator doors opened and Victoria stepped out, took one look at the scene, and crossed the room with that slow, deliberate stride that made even the bravest executives get out of her way. "Is he bothering you?" she asked. Not Ryan, meaned when I said, "Nothing I can't handle." She turned her gaze on him like she was assessing a bad investment. "You're trespassing, Ryan. Security will escort you out, and if you come back again, I'll have the building press charges." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me with the uneasy feeling that she'd just publicly confirmed what everyone already believed, that I wasn't just some fling, I was hers in a way that came with consequences. After that, the pretense of keeping things low-key evaporated completely. she started introducing me as her fiancé at networking events, inviting me into high-level meetings under the guise of assistant duties, but clearly just wanting me there, and even in the office she stopped pretending not to hover, popping by my desk just to ask if I wanted lunch, which was the corporate equivalent of draping a reserved sign over my chair, and yeah, part of me still bristled at how fast it had all happened, at how easily she'd folded me into her world, but another part, the part that remembered how her hand felt wrapped around mine in that charity gala ballroom, or how she'd sat beside my bed the night I was sick, knew I wasn't looking for an exit. One night, after a particularly long day, I found her sitting on the couch with 2 glasses of wine and that look she got when she was about to propose something I couldn't refuse. "I've been thinking," she said, passing me a glass, "about merging more than just our schedules," and I laughed because I knew where this was headed, but she didn't laugh back, just held my gaze and added, "I don't want there to be any version of your life that doesn't have me in it," and for once I didn't have a smart reply, just leaned back, sipped my wine, and realized that somewhere between that first wrong text and this moment, I'd stopped worrying about whether I could keep up with her and started wondering how I'd ever gone without her in the first place.